I don't regret speaking out about incest, and we opened up a national dialogue. Yes, it was very difficult for me as a person and as a family member and as a mom and as a daughter.
Mackenzie Phillips, the name that once captivated American audiences in American Graffiti and the sitcom One Day at a Time, was born into the glitter of a true rock star lineage. Her father was John Phillips, the legendary figure of the Mamas and the Papas. For many, it seemed like a dream beginning, a childhood surrounded by music, a career launched at just 12 years old, a teenage star earning tens of thousands of dollars a week. Yet that glow only concealed unspeakable pain. Mackenzie grew up in the midst of drugs, alcohol, and dark family secrets. Led into addiction by her own father at the age of 10, her youth unraveled into a downward spiral of arrests, 2 firings from a hit sitcom, and eventually a scandal that shocked Hollywood. Her life unfolded like a public tragedy. Moments of glory, devastating collapses, and haunting revelations that left the public stunned and sorrowful. At the same time, it was also a story of rare resilience. A woman who had fallen to the very bottom, yet rose again, rediscovered herself, and transformed unerasable scars into a force for helping others. But what left the world speechless was not only the tragedy she endured. It was Mackenzie's courage to expose the darkest truths of her life. The question that lingers: how could she continue to live and stand tall after it all? Mackenzie Phillips was born in 1959 into a family where fame and chaos walked hand in hand. Her father, John Phillips, was the frontman of the legendary band the Mamas and the Papas, while her mother, Susan Adams, was a refined woman who tried to shield her daughter from the excesses of the rock world. But when their marriage collapsed as Mackenzie turned 3, her childhood split in 2. One half spent in the calm safety of her mother's home, the other in her father's world of debauchery, where no boundary seemed to exist. From an early age, Mackenzie was pulled into the darkness. At 10, her father taught her how to roll a joint. By 11, she had already tried cocaine. For Mackenzie, drugs weren't taboo. They were a rite of passage, something she believed every child of artists had to experience. It wasn't mere childhood curiosity, but the direct result of an environment where her father treated drug use as natural, never hiding it from his children. At 12, Mackenzie lost her innocence, a painful milestone she would later describe as simply part of the chaos of her upbringing. It was no coincidence that journalists once ranked the Phillips clan among the most dysfunctional families in America, second only to the Kennedys. It was a family where drugs, alcohol, mental illness, sexual indulgence, and the absence of boundaries became an inherited legacy. In an interview years later, Mackenzie admitted bitterly, "I come from a long line of addicts, alcoholics, and undiagnosed mental illness. I grew up in an environment where out-of-control behavior was considered normal. That very environment planted the seeds of tragedy, seeds a fragile girl like Mackenzie never stood a chance against." Mackenzie Phillips's path into film had the makings of a fairy tale, though tragedy was already embedded within it. At just 12 years old, she and a few friends formed a small band at Waldorf School. During one performance, Mackenzie stood front and center as lead singer, innocent, vibrant, and full of energy. Among the audience was a casting director who immediately spotted something different in her. He approached and asked if Mackenzie would like to audition for a movie. Her mother, Susie, standing behind, only shook her head with a smile. She's only 12, but opportunity had knocked, and Mackenzie was eager to step through the door. Outshining some 300 other hopefuls, Mackenzie landed the role of Carol in George Lucas's American Graffiti, 1973. When the film premiered, she was only 13. American Graffiti not only became a box office success, but also a classic that launched the careers of several Hollywood names. Among the fresh young faces, Mackenzie stood out for her natural, unforced, and instinctive performance. It was the first moment audiences realized a new teenage star had arrived. That breakthrough quickly led to an even bigger opportunity: the role of Julie Cooper in CBS's sitcom One Day at a Time, 1975. At just 15, she portrayed the rebellious, outspoken daughter, constantly sparring with her mother in scenes that were both comedic and full of life. Julie became a relatable figure for millions of American teenagers. Mackenzie wasn't just acting, she became the voice of a generation of youth willing to speak up, push back, and question authority. Within just a few seasons, Mackenzie was one of the most sought-after young stars in Hollywood. Her weekly salary soared to $50,000, the equivalent of about $250,000 today. By 16, Mackenzie Phillips seemed to have it all: fame, fortune, and the adoration of the public. From a girl raised in family chaos, she had transformed into a model teen idol coveted by every magazine. But it was precisely then that the seeds of tragedy planted in her childhood began to sprout. Easy money only fueled the addictions that had haunted her since childhood. Endless shooting schedules, all-night parties, tables lined with cocaine. They merged into one reality, turning Mackenzie into a star who shone brightly on screen while quietly sinking off stage. Few knew that behind Julie Cooper's mischievous smile, the young actress had already stepped onto a slippery slope, one where drugs, scandals, and reckless choices would soon destroy everything she had just built. Success came too soon for Mackenzie Phillips, leaving her no time to mature. By 17, she was already living in the whirlwind of money, parties, and drugs, the very picture of the Hollywood fast lane. What had begun as teenage experimentation had now consumed her youth entirely. In November 1977, just as she turned 18, headlines erupted. Mackenzie was found unconscious on a West Hollywood street with a straw bearing traces of cocaine by her side. She was charged with disorderly conduct. On the cover of People magazine, she insisted she had mistakenly taken a tranquilizer at a party and had no idea of its effects. But the haunting image of America's sweetheart teen collapsed on the street left a lasting mark. She was placed on 6 months probation and ordered into diversion therapy, a supposed lifeline that felt more like a performance. By 1979, the decline could no longer be hidden. On the set of One Day at a Time, colleagues saw it plainly. Her voice was hoarse, her weight plummeting, her body depleted, her spirit unraveling. Producers forced her into a 6-week break, hoping she would recover. When she returned, nothing had changed. Within 2 weeks, the team gave her an ultimatum: resign under the guise of personal reasons or face public firing. Mackenzie chose the former, while the press reported a mutual decision. In truth, spokesperson Barbara Brogliotti said bluntly, "This is a step to save a child's life." She was in real danger. Just a year earlier, in 1979, Mackenzie had married Jeffrey Sessler, a legal assistant. But that marriage quickly imploded as both drowned in drugs. She would later admit bitterly, "I thought it was love, But really, it was just the heroin talking. By 1981, the union ended in financial disputes, leaving yet another fracture in her life. As her career crumbled, Mackenzie also watched her father, John Phillips, burn through nearly $1 million a year on heroin and cocaine. She herself squandered hundreds of thousands, nearly $500,000 gone in a single year. Father and daughter spiraled together, even injecting each other in the depths of addiction. By 1981, after 2 near-fatal overdoses, Mackenzie was admitted with her father to Fair Oaks Hospital for rehab. Dr. Mark Gold described her as so emaciated she could barely walk, wasted away by malnutrition and drugs. Yet strangely, that period of treatment opened a second chance. As word spread that Mackenzie was sober, one day at a time, brought her back in the fall of 1981. Her return was heralded as a rebirth, but temptation never truly left her life. By 1983, she was often nodding off on set. When producers demanded a drug test, she refused. That was the end. Mackenzie was permanently fired from One Day at a Time. In Hollywood's eyes, she was now unemployable. Her career froze in place. By her early 20s, Mackenzie Phillips had lived it all: fame, fortune, success, only to lose it all to drugs. Those years stood as a brutal warning. The blaze of youth's spotlight can explode brilliantly, but just as quickly vanish, especially when it rests on a foundation of childhood chaos and an unhealed soul. Amid the whirlwind of fame and addiction, Mackenzie Phillips walked down the aisle twice, but both marriages left scars that never fully healed. The first came in 1979, when she was just 19, marrying Jeffrey Sessler, a legal assistant for the Rolling Stones. The wedding was rushed, born more out of drug-fueled haze than genuine love. Mackenzie would later admit, "I thought I was in love." In truth, it was just the drugs talking. The marriage lasted less than a year. By 1981, the two had divorced in bitter financial disputes. Mackenzie recalled with resentment that Sessler contributed only about $800, while she had spent nearly $300,000, mostly on drugs, during their time together. He demanded half the residuals from 15 episodes I filmed. It was outright robbery. It was not just a failed marriage, but a reflection of a period when addiction swallowed her whole, blurring the line between love and exploitation. In 1986, Mackenzie entered her second marriage with musician Shane Fontaine. This relationship brought her a brief sense of calm after years of turmoil. A year later, in 1987, she gave birth to her only child, son Shane Barakan. Motherhood became a turning point, giving her a reason to fight. Yet the shadow of addiction still lingered. One memory never left her. She once locked herself in the bathroom to inject heroin while her little boy knocked on the door calling, "Mommy, where are you?" That moment cut her to the core. Mackenzie recalled, "I sat there with the needle in my hand, hearing my son's voice. I suddenly woke up. I knew if I kept going, I would lose everything." That turning point sent her to rehab, beginning what would become nearly 10 years of sobriety, the longest stretch of clean living in her life. But motherhood for Mackenzie was also a journey of contradictions. She loved her son deeply, yet was haunted by guilt. Guilt over her relapses, guilt for missing the chance to be a normal mother. That torment coexisted with maternal love, leaving her with both hope and scars. Though her marriage with Shane Fontaine did not last, Mackenzie always insisted that her son Shane was the saving grace of her life. He was the reason she returned to recovery time and again. The anchor that kept her tied to life. Amid the chaos, he was proof that even in her fragility, Mackenzie could still love, and that part of her heart remained whole for her child. If years of addiction, arrests, and 2 firings from her sitcom had already made Mackenzie Phillips's life a tragedy, what she revealed in 2009 sent shockwaves across the world. In her memoir, High on Arrival, Mackenzie confessed to her darkest secret, an incestuous relationship with her father, John Phillips, that lasted nearly a decade. It began in 1979, the night before her wedding to Jeffrey Sessler. Mackenzie, then just 19, blacked out from drugs. She awoke to find herself being violated by her father. "I woke up and realized I was having sex with him. I don't know when it started. I don't remember when it ended. All I knew was that it was the first time I was conscious of the horrifying truth." From that moment, Mackenzie was pulled into a twisted relationship she later described as a form of Stockholm Syndrome. Terrified yet dependent, confused into mistaking captivity for love, she remained in her father's grasp for nearly 10 years. It didn't happen every day, or even every week, but it happened long enough for me to confuse love with imprisonment. The relationship only ended when Mackenzie discovered she was pregnant and could not be certain whether the child belonged to her husband or her father. John Phillips gave her money to end the pregnancy through a medical procedure. That moment jolted her back to reality. I panicked. I had let him touch me for far too long. After that, I never allowed him to cross that line again. Her revelation detonated like a bomb in Hollywood. Many could not fathom that the star of One Day at a Time had carried such a monstrous secret. Her family was torn apart. Stepmother Michelle Phillips publicly denied the story, dismissing it as jealousy or a ploy to sell books. But her half-sister Chinna Phillips defended her. Many people are horrified, but my sister was brave to speak out. I'm proud of her. Chinna revealed she had known for years, but once the truth was made public, the family erupted. Mackenzie herself was unflinching. There is no such thing as consensual incest. There can never be consent between a father and a daughter, yet the scars it left on her soul never healed. Those memories became a key reason behind her relapses and self-destructive spiral. John Phillips's death in 2001 brought no release. Mackenzie was there at his bedside, holding his hand as he took his last breath. Yet inside her, one question still screamed unanswered. Why? How could you do this to me? It was a question she would carry for the rest of her life, with no explanation ever given. This tragedy not only shattered the image of a once celebrated family, but also exposed the darkest corner of fame. A world where children were abandoned to boundaryless chaos, where fathers ceased to be fathers, and where the truth, once spoken, exploded with the force of an atomic bomb. Even after ending her destructive relationship with her father, Mackenzie Phillips could not escape the pull of drugs. For years, her life was a vicious cycle: rehab, sobriety, relapse, collapse. There was a time when she managed nearly a decade of sobriety, especially after becoming a mother. She completed a 9-month residential rehab program in the early 1990s, then returned to television with Disney's So Weird, 1999 to 2001. Audiences believed Mackenzie had finally broken free from her past. But a surgery and prescription painkillers pulled her back into the same trap. When doctors refused to refill her prescriptions, she turned once again to old dealers, finding comfort in cocaine and heroin, the friends she knew too well. In 2008, Just as she was about to turn 50, Mackenzie was arrested at Los Angeles International Airport for possession of heroin and cocaine. The image of the once beloved teen star in handcuffs was a devastating blow. Yet it became the true turning point. Mackenzie later reflected, "I asked myself, how many more times does the universe have to knock on the door of my consciousness for me to wake up? How many more times do I have to be struck down before I finally rise?" By 2014, Mackenzie had entered rehab 11 times, but the 12th was different. This time, she wasn't just getting sober for herself. She began to see her painful experiences as a mission. After regaining clarity, Mackenzie went back to school, earned a counseling certificate, and devoted herself to addiction recovery work. She served at a treatment center and later spent years at Breathe Life Healing Center in Los Angeles. Alongside her work, Mackenzie wrote Hopeful Healing, 2017, a handbook of sorts, sharing her journey of resisting temptation, reclaiming inner freedom, and learning self-forgiveness. She insisted, "Forgiveness wasn't for my father. It was for myself, to keep living, to stop dying a little each day in guilt and pain." From a fallen actress, Mackenzie gradually became a respected addiction counselor, leading therapy groups and, with colleague Brad Lamb, co-creating the podcast America Recovers. Her stories weren't polished or theoretical. They came straight from the lived experience of someone who had touched the depths of despair. Her comeback also left marks on the screen. She appeared in Orange is the New Black as Barbara Denning and joined the remake of One Day at a Time in a completely new role, closing the circle of her career in a profoundly different way. This time, Mackenzie wasn't the rebellious young girl brought down by drugs. She stood as a woman battered but unbroken, fully aware of who she was, living with a mission far greater than fame. Today, Mackenzie Phillips is no longer a constant presence on television as she once was in her teenage years. Yet whenever she speaks, the public listens, with a mix of respect and sorrow. From a teen star destroyed by drugs, from a victim of family tragedy, she has been reborn as a voice of hope for those trapped in addiction and trauma. Mackenzie's legacy is not measured in the number of roles or awards, but in the courage to tell the truth. When she admitted to her incestuous relationship with her father, she knew she would be condemned, shunned, even cast out of her own family. Still, she chose to reveal it, believing her story might save others who lived in silence. It was both shocking and profoundly powerful, transforming personal agony into a tool for warning and healing. Professionally, Mackenzie has left her mark through more than a decade of work as a counselor in addiction treatment. Hundreds of patients have said they found hope in her raw honesty. No filters, no polish, just the truth from someone who had once stood at death's edge. Through the America Recovers podcast, she has extended that influence, turning private pain into collective lessons. On screen, even if no longer at her peak, Mackenzie has shown resilience. From Orange is the New Black to the remake of One Day at a Time, she proved that acting remains in her blood, though it no longer defines her entire existence. For her, art is just one door. The real mission is guiding others out of the same darkness she once endured. The legacy Mackenzie Phillips leaves behind is proof that no matter how deep the wounds, a person can rise, forgive themselves, and move forward with renewed purpose. To audiences, she stands both as a symbol of pain, a reminder of the terrible cost of fame and excess, and as an inspiration for survival and rebirth. Her story forces us to pause and reflect. If a woman crushed by addiction, betrayed by her own father, could rise again to help others, then perhaps any of us too can find a way out of our own darkness. In her 60s, Mackenzie Phillips is no longer the center of Hollywood's spotlight, nor does she live in the all-night party scene of her youth. She has chosen a quieter, simpler life, focusing on family. At the heart of it is her relationship with her son, Shane, a grown musician who was once the lifeline that pulled her back from the edge. Long haunted by guilt that he had to watch her battle addiction as a child, Mackenzie now strives to be present in his life, not as a fallen star, but as a true mother. Her days revolve around the ordinary things she once missed. She spends time reading, writing, meditating, and embracing the calm of her small home. She enjoys walking, gardening, and tending to her space. Activities that might seem trivial, but for Mackenzie carry profound meaning for her recovery. Today, Mackenzie lives in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles, in a nearly century-old Spanish bungalow. She calls it her safest place, a quiet refuge in the middle of the city that allows her to stay balanced after so much turmoil. Financially, after years of addiction and loss, she is not as wealthy as many stars of her era. Her net worth is estimated at around $1 to $2 million, a modest figure compared to her early career peak, yet enough for her to live comfortably and devote herself to recovery work and a modest lifestyle. What has changed most for Mackenzie is not her career or money, but her inner state. She no longer runs from her memories, nor does she try to erase them. Instead, she has learned acceptance. What happened is part of her life, and the only choice left is to live on with a new sense of peace. In one conversation, she said, "I'm not trying to forget. I'm just learning how to live with it without letting it destroy me." This is Mackenzie Phillips today. A woman once crushed by her past, now choosing simplicity, cherishing her son, and finding calm within herself. The glitter is gone, the noise has faded, but what remains is a heart once shattered, still beating steadily, in peace, after surviving so much. The life of Mackenzie Phillips is a vivid testament to the harsh contradictions of fame. A teen star once adored by America, driven by the very spotlight into addiction, scandal, and family tragedy. From a 12-year-old girl who lit up the screen to a 19-year-old betrayed by her father, and decades lost in the grip of drugs and relentless relapses, it seemed she might be buried forever. Yet in the deepest darkness, Mackenzie found a way back. She dared to expose the unspeakable secret of incest, dared to tell a truth no one wanted to hear, and turned it into a path of healing for herself and for others. Today, Mackenzie is no longer remembered as Julie Cooper from One Day at a Time, but as a powerful witness, a woman who survived the unimaginable and rose again to help those still trapped in the abyss she once knew too well. She may no longer have wealth or the glitter of stardom, but in her 60s, Mackenzie Phillips possesses something far more precious. Peace after the storm, presence in her son's life, and fulfillment in transforming pain into purpose. If Mackenzie could survive, forgive herself, and keep moving forward after everything, then perhaps each of us too can find the courage to confront and overcome the darkness in our own lives. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next moving story.